All right, I am joined today with former head coach of the University of Mary Marauders, University of Mary Hall of Fame class of 2018, Bismarck, North Dakota native, and the current athletic director at BSC. He's got all sorts of things going on with his new job title he accumulated a couple of years ago, and he's adding programs and upgrading facilities left and right up at BSC. Coach Schulz, how are we doing today? How's your summer started off?
Doing good, Kyler. Thanks for having us aboard. Summer's going good, enjoying the weather and just kind of enjoying switching gears. You kind of go from full speed and doing all your event management and to all of a sudden where it's more planning and scheming and looking at the big picture for next year and beyond.
Gotcha. Yes, I'm sure summer slows down a little bit, but we still find ways to keep ourselves busy. So Coach Schulz is the winningest head coach in Marauders history. He was actually there from the beginning. Coach Schulz, for you even personally, even going back to your childhood, I know you even played in the Bismarck Midget Football League when it was the BMFL. We are actually in our 50th year, I believe. It was 49 or 50. We couldn't decide, so we just made this year as the 50th year of the BMFL, which is now the BYFL after we merged with the YFL with our third and fourth graders joining us now. So Coach Schulz, where did your love of football begin from day one?
That's probably where it did. Probably started watching football on TV, watching the Minnesota Vikings and Fran Tarkington, and just you saw it every day. It was one of the few sports that was on. I mean, Major League Baseball was on like once a week at that time. It was on Saturday afternoon. So then people moved next to us. It was the Parsons family, and they came in from New England, and their dad was actually our coach, Mr. Parsons, and it was started playing over at their neighborhood and just fell in love with the sport. It's kind of really interesting. My family really wasn't into sports. It was automotive. My dad was mechanic, and I was the only one that was in sports. And it was because of the things you just hinted at. It was the start of BMFL and joining that, and it was just the neighbor that dad was the coach and went in a whole different direction than the family tree.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the coaches you had growing up? Any names in great coaching that really grew your interest and passion in football from the start?
Well, one was Larry Sanders, and then there was Mr. Parsons, and there's Mr. Shields, and then another guy that really helped out was his name was Jim Kautzman. And his name was Katz, and it was actually my tie to
Oh yeah.
BSC. He was the equipment manager up here, so I used to spend a lot of time up at BSC, hanging around the athletes and watching practice and stuff, just because of the tie to Katz. And then another guy's name is Ray Maloney. He was one of our other coaches, and he's a sports writer now. But they were just all so interested and so caring and there for you, and just got you directed down the path to enjoying the game. And if you go into coaches, that was the whole influence. That's what all along is. I was exposed to good people and great people, and then got really exposed to some really great minds later on in my career that taking their schemes and techniques helped us be successful.
So you're part of the UMary coaching staff from square one. I believe they call themselves the originals. I know there's the Jesse Scalzos and the Brian Hoffs of the world. I know I coached with Brian Hoff, so he talks about it from time to time. That was back in 1989, I believe, was the first varsity season. So what was it like coaching back, not just starting a program from the very beginning, but literally in the late 80s? I'm not even born yet. But what was that like, especially in comparison to your coaching career beginning in the 2000s and towards the end of your coaching career?
It was fun. It was exciting. I mean, it was tough. I mean, we were starting and we were going against established teams like Dickinson State and Minot, and Valley was really good at that time. And it we were all new. We were all, not that they had a bunch of Canadian junior players that were 24, 25 years old, and we were a bunch of 18-year-old kids at the first time. But it was just cool being at the beginning of something. And it's kind of interesting how that topic, it happened again because so that's the Marauder originals, but we also was part of the group that went Division II. So that was a whole step up and a new beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's part of I don't know. I think it's probably why they hired me at BSC. I think they looking at possibly, maybe down the road or just in the back of their mind adding football someday. So I was there when they started football at UMary. I was there when they switched levels at UMary. I've recruited to Bismarck. I've been in the NEI level and all those things. So it's a great experience. And, but the competitor you can't stand taking your whoopings early on, but it was still cool to be part of the foundation. So great group. What you spoke to is a big part there, is group that didn't have great success, but they're super tight because they know they started something and charted something. They might even be tighter than some of the very successful teams.
Correct. I can echo that because, like I said, I coach with Brian Hoff. I actually probably know several of the guys on the team because several of them still reside in Bismarck, and I know Hoff, every time he sees his former teammates, they hit it off right away, which is really good to see because it was years and years and a few decades ago at this point. So, during both your graduate assistant and your time as a defensive coordinator, what did that teach you kind of about yourself, and how did that kind of prepare you to eventually be a head coach?
Well, I always tell people the most fun I ever had coaching was being a position coach, coaching the linebackers. But when you're in that position, you think, well, boy, what it'd be like to call the defense. And then you think, well, boy, what it'd be like to run the whole show. And, I always tell people, be careful what you wish for. Now, it's really great moving to the leadership because you have a vision and a belief and like how people should be treated, or kind of a direction and overall themes of your program. And when you move up the leadership chain, you're allowed to influence that more. But it was just, I think, it was a natural progression, and just coaching linebackers, being around the defense, and then when Coach Newman left, then I moved up to the coordinator role, and in this coordinator role, you just start putting all the pieces together, and it's really it's geometry, it's angles, it's leverage, it's ability. How close can you line up to somebody? If you're slow, if you're fast, you can cheat up further. There's so many things to it. And then you learn by people run something that you didn't have a good plan for, and you go back in that film room, and next time you see it, you got a great plan for it. So that's part of the learning curve. And the interesting part was moving to the other side of the ball, was going coaching on offense. The great part is you have an understanding of the other side, but you still have a learning curve. So moving back and forth on different sides of the ball, I think really helped me, but it also hurt me. I look at someone like Coach Petrino, who's now the safeties coach at Wyoming. He's always coached the game through the defensive secondary. So I always say I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, whereas he's for 20 plus years has viewed the game through that thing, and no one will do a better job at disguising secondary run fits, I mean, every day he's honing his skills in that area. So it was fun. And we had a lot of really, what really helps too is we had a lot of really good defensive players when I first started coordinating. We had the Onemans and Steve Cluton and many more, Clements. It was just had a great bunch. So what I didn't know, they covered up for in their athletic talent.
It's so interesting you mentioned angles and leverage, and I know when we've had Bismarck, some youth football clinics with you, you've talked about pathways in the backfield, and even though you talk about all these, technical terms and more complex football ideas from the college level, we still talk about it in 5th and 6th grade with all sorts of things and angles, and how much tackling has changed with hawk tackling and attacking the other side of the ball now, which is still very weird to coach. We got kids attacking the backside, and we're like, that was right, but it didn't look right. But it's changed so much.
Yeah. So after I got done coaching, I went and coached at Simley Middle School for a year. And the whole goal is, one of the things I've always saw in this town is Mat Pack. And Mat Pack had these youth wrestlers all the way up. And then at one time, Bismarck High and Century were the number 1 and number 2 wrestling teams in the nation. And what they did is they just taught it so well. It's almost like the Russians. The Russians used to put their best coaches down at the lower level because they learned how to do it right, found the talent and those things. So I've always, it's curriculum planning. It's both vertical and horizontal. So through your 12-year career at big BPS, and also just what you're doing in 3rd grade, what you're doing in 4th grade, what you're doing in 5th grade. And the next thing is, when you're out there, I truly believe this is, you're having practice with those 3rd and 4th graders. You got to teach them something. And if I'm going to teach them how to take a center exchange, there's no reason you can't teach it right. The only reason you don't teach it right is because no one's exposed you to it. So so no matter what you're teaching them, you can teach them how to hand it off right. You could teach them the same as Bill Belichick's teaching the Patriots, because there's always little different nuances to teaching technique, but you could teach it right away, and then you save that kid a lot of problems because he doesn't have to relearn it as he moves up the chain.
Absolutely. You mentioned getting the exchange from the center. I mean, if you can't do that in a football game, you really can't do anything else. So it's a lot of things that are overlooked, especially with coaches who want to come in going 5 wide in 6th grade and throwing the ball around. Well, if you can't get the ball from the center, you can't really do anything at all. So
yeah, and it's amazing that, obviously under center versus shotgun, but under center is amazing how many people, if you just, football is kind of an interesting sport. You could have played football for 30 years, but you never played quarterback, or you never played left tackle, or you never played safety. So, and then you got to go coach it and teach it, and then you find out you really don't know it. And sometimes you think it looked that way, but you didn't really understand the true nuances of it. And the cool thing about today is it's all out there. If you're willing to read books and watch videos, and it's out there. Back when I first started, once a year we go to a clinic and listen to someone talk for an hour. Now there's no reason you don't know it. If you don't know it, you're not working hard enough.
correct. So you take over as a head coach, I believe, in the 1999 season, or going into the 1999 season. You experienced success rather quickly, and I can't say I remember the exact year growing up around the team and around the program, but I do remember plenty of names, and I remember the Marauders having a lot of success, not just during the regular season, but finding success in the postseason as well. You lead the Marauders to the semifinals of the NAIA playoffs, and just the second time in school history. What do you attribute to yourself as a coach to all that early success? I know you talked earlier about the originals and being surrounded by good people and good players, but what do you attribute so much early success so early on in your head coaching career to?
Well, it's one of the bad things of that is that was our best year. So when they say don't peak too soon, but but we had a lot of good years after. But a lot of it was just a continuation. I was there. Coach Newman left. I became the D coordinator. I was a D coordinator. Coach Lennon took the UND job. I moved up to the head coach. So a lot of it was continuity. It was a whole bunch of coaches in for a long time, coaching, working, administration, giving us resources, and we just kept building. And it was just the right time. It was all of a sudden, Coach Lennon got a great opportunity, went to UND, won national championship, and we had a good crew coming back. And then it was, getting the right coaches in place to fit, who we lost to UND. And then, some of it's, but we didn't change anything. Chris Schwab came back and he knew the whole offense and knew how to do it. And he'd been doing it for years. And we had defensive talent, and we got a little of infusion of talent that came in. We got someone like Quentin Cradle came in, and we had good players too. I mean, you have AJ Street, and we had some dynamic players that, Seth Meyer. I mean, I could go on and on and on. We had great physical linemen with Brian Fettig and Andy Nelson and Nolan Canwright, and I'm missing a couple. Mr. Volk, he was really talented. So
Yep.
it was a system, and we kept our system in place, and it was technique, and a lot of it was a continuation, and it goes back to Tom Shea, it goes back to Jim Driscoll, it goes back to Dale Lennon. It was, we were, but some of it was. I'd been there the whole time. I think if someone came in new, it might have been not such an early start, because you would have came in and not knowing the athletes, not knowing who you're playing against, and the kids would have had to learn new systems.
So we get more into your coaching career as you continue, not just in the NAIA division, but you guys' transition to NCAA Division II. Having a lot of players, not just from North Dakota, but a lot of them from Vegas and the Houston area and all over the country. I think of guys like Jamal Lomax and James Miles, all these guys that, picked me up from grade school some days after school. And I had a lot of older brothers in a sense, which was really cool. And I even think of the Jason Bonos in Alaska. So how were you able to recruit these guys, and what in the world was bringing all these guys to a little tiny school in Bismarck, North Dakota?
And so how we viewed it was, like we call it the Notre Dame model. One of the things at North Dakota, there's a school every 100 miles, and it's a small population base. So we started in our backyard. Who could we get from Bismarck, Mandan? Who could we get from Western North Dakota? Who could we get from South Dakota, Wyoming? And we started there and moved out. But we knew that you had to be a certain level to play. Otherwise, even the locals aren't. If we had all locals, they're not going to come anymore if we're getting creamed every weekend. So
Yeah.
there's just a certain talent level you got to be able to play in these leagues, or you're going to get crushed. And every one of those places you mentioned, there was a tie. Houston was early on when Coach Driscoll was here. Him and it was actually through Roger Haug, someone he knew that taught at St. Mary's, that taught in Houston, started our Houston chain a little bit. But for us, it was Jeff Doctor. Jeff Doctor had coached down at Conroe, Texas, and we just went down there. We knew, and you hit it on the head. Is in Houston, Texas, there's still good football players left when all the good schools are done recruiting.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of schools down there.
And those kids are looking for a place to play, and the parents, we had a safe place. They trusted us, and they want, it was all about really getting their education. So we told them we'd take care of their sons. And then Jeff Doctor having those ties was a big part. And then Vegas actually we were playing Minot State, and they ran a little slant route to a kid named Harry Mills. He put his foot in the ground, went 90 yards for a touchdown. The next day, I bought a plane ticket to Vegas because we're going to start recruiting there. And a lot of it's Allegiant Airlines. It was Phoenix and Vegas. You could get to Bismarck cheaply, and it was a 2-hour flight. And the other thing about Nevada is all they have is UNR, Reno, and Las Vegas, and so all they have is D1 schools. There's no place for those kids to go play. So there's leftover. Alaska was kind of a thing where, our California kids, they didn't like the cold as much, and Alaska kids had no place to go to. It was the same thing. They don't have a college in their state that plays football. So we were also thinking too, if they come down here, the weather isn't going to be a factor for them. And we really tried to get into places like Winnipeg and Regina, Canada, but just didn't have as much success there. But it was kind of funny. Jason Bono, I remember him looking at me one day, and he was from Anchorage, and he was actually upset because it's colder in Bismarck than it is in Anchorage. He thought he was coming down to the warmth.
All right, so you guys go from NAIA to NCAA Division II. I'm not exactly sure what year that was. I couldn't really track it down, but can you, as a head coach of the program, the transition? I mean, there's so many benefits to moving up. There's obviously some cons that go along with it. I mean, you can probably speak to a lot more of that as you experienced the transition and you were coached during the transition. But can you talk about that transition, both as a head coach and as a program going NAIA to Division II?
Well, the hard part was we were arguably one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the nation in NAIA. And it was rolling, there was tradition, there was a system, there was a plan. And, we were just hoping could we get one step further and win the national championship. Then when you moved up, it was, UND was still Division II at that time. It was University of Nebraska, Omaha. I mean, you're going against some big dogs. The hardest year probably was that first year because we had a really good team, but we played an NAIA schedule, and we called it the farewell tour. We were playing for nothing. We couldn't win the conference. We couldn't go to the playoffs. We couldn't, it was just kind of purgatory. That was kind of hard especially when you were used to, playing for what we considered big stakes, so that was the hard part. The cool part about going D2 was, we never had that high. We had some good seasons, a couple 7-4 seasons, 6-5 seasons, beat Augustana a couple times when they had CJ Ham, played against Adam Thielen. I mean, we had played in the Metrodome. The next day you saw Brett Favre sitting right where you were over there.
Yep.
But the cool part really to me was the professionalism of the league and the coaches. And then also it was the X's and O's changed. It was a little bit better football, it was a little bit more scheme. It forced you to get better. So, I mean, if I would have known what I did at the end, like you said in the early years, it'd have been dangerous, so it was,
Yeah.
but it was just a high level of play. But, I throw out there a lot. I remember being in 8th grade track, and a kid would go to a meet with two schools and they get a blue ribbon, and they were actually happier getting that blue ribbon sometimes. And I tell them, well, if you go run at a big meet and you run a faster time, that's actually a better thing. So that's kind of what happened a little bit. We were doing probably a better job of football at the end, but we weren't getting the blue ribbon, but we were still doing things at a high level and a good level. And it's cool to see things like now. I hope I don't hit one of your further questions, but it's cool seeing someone like Andy Kolnicki, who was on our coaching staff, is going to coordinate the Penn State offense next year. And so it's fun talking to him about, what the journey from here to there was and the steps after and what we were doing. And so it's, those are really interesting things.
Yeah, they play at West Virginia here in the fall, and I think my parents are going out there. Obviously, my brother and his wife and soon-to-be firstborn are out there. So I wish I could go out there, but time just not going to allow. But when I know my parents are going out for Penn State at West Virginia, could be an interesting one to start it all off. So I know this is a rather loaded question that could have a pretty loaded answer, but again, connecting NAIA and D2 and obviously recruiting and limitations and regulations, you hear about them on SportsCenter every other day all year long, especially with football. And I would say men's basketball is probably the other one that pops up. I know it happens in every sport, but from your point of view and perspective, what were the major differences between NAIA and NCAA Division II? And I know there could be 100 different things to this answer, but if you could just pick a couple just from your own perspective, recruiting is way different, the rules, and I mean, you get into drug testing and that sort of thing, and NAIA can be a free-for-all, and Division II certainly is not. So,
but it's interesting too. I mean, one of the things we found out, you can put NCAA in front of it, but the NCAA cares a heck of a lot more about Alabama and Miami than they do about UMary and Minot State.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of the rules are still to change in both levels. It would probably be some other school turning you in. I guarantee you the NCAA helicopter isn't flying in every day checking in on the Northern Sun team. So
Probably not.
some of that's over blown a little bit. And but I think the levels are, I mean, one thing you saw right away is we had a lot of D2 or higher 1AA talent in NEI, not that they were really bad students, but maybe they were missing an English class or maybe missing a math grade or maybe off a little bit on that ACT, SAT test, and so they couldn't go to the NCAA. They couldn't get through the clearinghouse. So they were playing for us and they were talented. But as soon as you got through that clearinghouse, now every NCAA school came in on them, and they had big bucks. They could fly them in, full ride scholarship and all those things. And whereas NEI, it was more like, oh, I didn't get through the clearinghouse. I have a friend or a kid from a neighboring school playing on your team. I'll come play for you. They said it was a good experience. I trust you. So in some ways, NCAA helped us recruit higher level athletes, but in some ways, we lost some of our elite guys also. So it's interesting. I think the biggest thing that maybe it's a marketing thing also is like as UMary positions itself in Minnesota. Now Minnesota people didn't know what NEI was, and people from Minnesota hadn't heard about UMary. And I'm talking about general students now, and even the Catholic mission of the school. So now we start going down and playing there, and that people from that state get used to us and they see NCAA, which they know. And we had kids from Wisconsin now, and their parents would only come to our games in Minnesota. They wouldn't drive all the way out to Bismarck for the home games. They went to our Minnesota games. Like Henry Lau's parents they gave us brownies after every game we played in Minnesota. They probably made it out to Bismarck a couple times, but it let us get there. Then Minnesota opened up Minnesota, which has 10 million people where, I could play half my games at home and I know about you and those things. But it opened up the general student too, because outside of when you're in North Dakota and Montana and South Dakota at the time, NEI was very good. Even so, Sioux Falls was winning national championships. Carroll College was winning national championships. We were in Final Fours. It was very good, and people knew what NEI was. But as soon as you moved out of those areas, they don't know what it is. And so that's some of the marketing positioning thing. But it's really all they are is the governing body, and it's really interesting seeing what's going to happen right now because if the NCAA top football teams and if they ever break away,
Breakaway,
it
yeah.
it kind of wrecks the funding formula for the lower level NCAA. So
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be real interesting to watch what's happening now.
So speaking to that recruiting, you talked about guys in Minnesota who say, "Oh, my parents don't even have to travel because we're going to play 3 games out here each season, anyways." Talking about USC and UCLA, I believe those are the two coming to the Big Ten this coming fall. Do you think? And I know they talked on SportsCenter. I don't know how much truth there was to it, and I don't know enough about recruiting and where coaches recruit in different conferences. But do you think recruiting in Nebraska or recruiting in LA is going to be different now that USC players know that they're going to be playing in the Midwest 4 times a season, or you don't think that doesn't make a huge difference? I don't even know if, not sure if LA people would even be interested in playing at a Nebraska or anything like that.
Well, I heard Tom Osborne speak once, and he said tradition's important, and he said, and Nebraska could sell that. He said warm weather is important. No, Nebraska's struggled selling that. I know the guy at Notre Dame used to sell, hey, if you want to go to the NFL, it's going to be cold in Chicago, New England, and Green Bay. You better get used to it, son. So they were just combating that in recruiting. And then the other thing you always got to really think about here is you can be from LA and go play at Lincoln, Nebraska. But, here's what was happening. Oregon came in and wowed all these kids and gave them all these nice uniforms and these great facilities, but they were coming from Houston, and all of a sudden, so all Texas A&M did was copy what Oregon was doing, build all that stuff, because it really still comes down to, can your grandma, can your high school, can your midget, can they come to a lot of your games? And if you're in Lincoln, Nebraska, and you're from Compton, California, they can't get to all your games, so you lose that. John Gagliardi from St. John's always said football and athletics brings people together. And that's what you see it. You go to a Bismarck High game, all the families there and relatives and the student body, all are watching the game. But if your kid's going to school and, example, Lauren Ware's playing at Texas A&M, love to go watch her play. I saw her in the gym here the other day, but I can't go watch. I just don't have the ability to go down. I don't know. I know her dad real well, Joe Ware. I don't know how many games he can get to, So it's there is some, but still also if you want to play at the highest level, that's the price you pay a little bit.
Yeah. So moving on from your coaching career, you kind of, I wouldn't say it was a pit stop because you already had the position out at University of Mary, but you continue with your position in the sport and leisure management program. Can you talk about kind of what that job entailed and what experiences you were able to give to your students? I know when I was out at Mary, a lot of students in your classes had the opportunity to go maybe travel a little bit even and visit some venues and stadiums and see how a lot of those places operated. Can you talk a little bit about what those experiences entailed?
That's really interesting. It was cool because I've been trained as a teacher, as an educator. So I was all into what Kyler Olson was learning from being in football, and I viewed everything from a teaching. As soon as you flip over to that, you're viewing everything but the game. You're viewing the business side of sports.
Yep.
And in that I feel like when this job opened up at BSC, I think that changes things. I've coached, so I can understand what our coaches are going through. I understood the educational part of it, but those 5 years of being in sports management have helped me understand the business side of it. And I think if you get someone that's just a business side, doesn't know how to coach, there's a blind spot there. Or there's they don't understand that. And if you're just a coach and you go up because you're an old coach and you don't see all the business side, there's a steep learning curve there, and even just understanding how it operates, or even getting in that mindset, because right away you're like kind of offended by the business side. So that was huge, but it was actually one of real neat time and fun. We got a girl right now named Tasha Dembo that's working for the New York Jets. We got Mackenzie Houston's working for a NHL hockey team. Hannah Saliba, who
Yep.
she's with the Texas Rangers.
Shout out to Hannah.
Marcia Gay Knight wasn't really in our classes, but she runs Black and Sports Business. She's with the Olympics, and she would come in and the NHL. She was working at there. She would come in and tutor our students. We got a girl named Callie Wagner that's working for the PGA down in Florida. She wasn't one of Hannah Larson was working for the Denver Nuggets in that organization, and she kind of got hooked up because Bree Lynch came and spoke to our
Oh
class,
yeah, yeah.
and Bree worked for the Timberwolves for years. So it was really cool. And we worked the Super Bowl, we worked the Final Four. It was just kind of great at seeing people, break into that. And then we got some guys like working for the Minot, Hottentots or what they call
Hot
it.
tots. Yep.
We got guys that are working as an AD out at MSUB Billings. So it's cool seeing a whole bunch of people that wanted to do kind of what I'm doing now in the profession, because they took the class. But the one thing about sports management is it's competitive. Everybody thinks they want to work in sports, so
Mm-hmm.
you better gain your experiences. You better get your verbs. Dave St. Peter taught this. He said a lot of the jobs today have an applicant tracking system, and they're looking at your resume and are looking for verbs of things you've accomplished and done. And what really stuck with me was this: is when you're an athlete, what you're doing is it's a huge sacrifice because you're at practice and playing every day. Or some like the kids that weren't in athletics, they could come and get experiences with the
Oh yeah.
with the Larks or with the Bismarck, the football team that I can't think of their name right now. What was our indoor football league team?
Bismarck Bucks at the
Yeah, the
moment.
Bucks. They could do things with they were getting experiences, and even the Blue Crew out at UMary, they were getting verbs on their resume where all you were saying was football be very, very good to me.
Yeah.
All you'd done is play. You hadn't done the sports side, the sports management side of it.
So you get hired as the athletic director at BSC, and I noticed in the bio it said August of 2021. I would imagine that was towards the tail end of the pandemic. Did the pandemic and all of kind of life slowly starting to get back to real again have a lot to do with you getting back in, or you starting your role as the athletic director? Did that affect it at all?
So BSC is kind of interesting to me. Like I told you before, my midget football coach was here. I went to school here and played here. So obviously huge ties to UMary, 29, 30 years there. I graduated from UMary also. So I mean, but I live by the YMCA. It's less than 2 minutes to come up here. And I really feel like what got me at the end is they were looking at adding sports, they were looking at new facilities, and they were exploring at another level. And that just sounded so interesting. And it's almost like I played at BSC, left, coached at Montana State, coached UMary, coached at different levels. I uh, I had the sports management piece, I had the coaching piece. It was like, you almost felt like this was almost in a weird way was your destiny. You're going to come back to a school that's trying to do some of the things that you've been exposed to while you had left before you came back again. So that's what excited me. But it's really the pandemic is interesting though. It really had nothing to do with anything. It was more, but it did provide. It was really towards the end, so I didn't have to deal that much with the sitting players out or the 14 days off or no one in the crowds or masks. That was kind of ending a little bit. But the hard part was people had gotten to where they weren't coming to games anymore. So now they found other hobbies or that become out of practice. So now you're in some ways you're still getting people back into the routine of coming back to your events and those things. Um, so pandemic probably didn't have it too much for me. It was more probably they talked to me, I talked to them. It felt like the right time, and I'm all obviously probably towards encore career, maybe a little bit towards the end of my working career. So it was kind of fun to put it all together though, and I was excited at what things they were talking about doing.
So since you have arrived at BSC, you talked before you even got there, they had talks of adding sports and programs left and right. What are some programs that you guys have been able to add over the past few years? And I know I've seen some renderings of upgrading the basketball arena and that sort of thing. So what kind of new things are coming to Bismarck State?
Well, we've added track and field and cross country and half marathon, and that's brought like 60 more athletes to our school. And then
Wow.
one thing we got more under the athletic umbrella was our esports and our trap shooting team. They were already in place, but kind of more under, involved with us. And then at the same time, softball was just coming back. it was already established and back, but we're adding wrestling, and wrestling's a BSC staple. I mean, Brock Lesnar wrestled here.
Yep.
Our teams were national, runner-ups, and I mean, it's just something that's very good. So we're excited about bringing that back next fall. Rodeo, they had a rodeo club before, but rodeo not they got rid of it many years ago. But now we're bringing back a true rodeo team. And when you rodeo, you're Division I. I mean, we're going to go against Texas A&M, Montana State, University of Wyoming. I mean, it's exciting, and it really makes sense to me. The wrestling is BSC. It's our town. And it was at BSC, and it's got even Jeff Schumacher coming back. Then he
Yep.
he wrestled here, and he was the coach here before it. But rodeo too. I always thought the West starts in Mandan. I mean, and you talk about rodeo champions like Mr. Brewer, and it's a natural fit for us. It's our, probably isn't in Fargo or Fergus Falls, Minnesota, but Bismarck's kind of where it starts, and some of it's the Dale Paulke Arena and all those things. Things we have in the queue are, women's wrestling's in the queue, and it kind of, like you said, the elephant in our room. If we'd ever bring back football, we'd have to have like 3 women's sports, something maybe like women's soccer or women's golf or women's tennis, and so some of that's looking at for Title IX reasons. So some of those are what would our next step be there. And I know that, women's cheer and dance is something that, kind of look at, it's also another reason that we would consider looking at NEIA. They offer more sports than they do in our NJCA Mondac conference. So, and then the next thing you alluded to was we're going to build a $40 million arena, and it's going to have the Bavindick Center, and it's going to be the main home of wrestling and volleyball and basketball, and then training and all those things. And also when we leave, it opens up the armory for baseball and softball. We're going to have a pitching lab. We're going to have a whole room for batting tees. We're going to have 4 batting cages. We're going to have a virtual reality hitting room. We're going to have a room where our sporting clays can come in and do simulation shoots, so it's going to open up training for some of our other sports that are already here. So, and it's just going to be a great venue that, we loved the Armory. It was our home, but it was never built for athletics. It was built for National Guard marching, and so it's going to be great for the trajectory of our programs.
That sounds great, and it'll be a great addition to Bismarck. Whether you're a Marauder fan or a Bismarck sports fan or anything like that, it's great to bring some new facilities. Hopefully, I was just talking to Eddie Streeter at state baseball last weekend, and I said, why do all these Fargo teams show up and just embarrass all of these teams out of the West? And he said, well, we need to build some more facilities for baseball. And he's like, we have all this football stuff, all this hockey stuff, all this golf stuff. He goes, somebody needs a lot of us need to step forward and start getting some more baseball area, especially in the winter, so we can be playing baseball for more than 4 months out of the year.
Well, I totally, it's interesting because I'm a football guy, and football, we needed probably at UMary was an indoor because Minot State bubbles their field and they can go do 7-7 year round, and so did many other schools in the conference, and I know that's in the plans now, but I view the world through a football world, and and now though when you're an AD, you start viewing it for track, and there's not. If everyone says, well, do multiple sports. Well, there are some kids that are just pole vaulters, or that's their niche, or maybe they can play first base in baseball, but they can't make the basketball team, and they can't play receiver in football. But they're niche. We're still for multiple sports. But the 2 sports I see in this community right now that are missing out is track and field. They really, if you were a pole vaulter, you're a Caleb Larson, where you're a great runner and that's what you're good at, there's no place for you to run most of the year. And the next thing is baseball. And baseball, we can hit and we can field a little bit, but you can't catch a fly ball. You can't, and that, of course, once again, building a indoor, I don't know what you do for baseball sometimes, because like softball, we can play in the domes. Like we play at the Minot Dome, we play in the Jamestown Dome now, and but baseball, I mean, you'd have to build US Bank Stadium, I mean, or something like the Metrodome, because you need a big area to play. So, but I have seen an interesting thing. I saw a place that wasn't so big. What they had was an infield, but they didn't have an outfield. So you had live pitching, you had like netting in the outfield, you had an infield. I mean, they do it in Iowa, so you can go down and do everything except catch a fly ball. So there's ideas and thoughts out
90%
there.
of what you need right there. Yeah.
So it's but yeah, you do see it. You see them, and then with our winters, you know, being so unpredictable, especially the last couple of years. Even this year was nice in the winter, but it wasn't nice in the spring. You struggle to get collegiate games, and I know the Allegiant team can play all summer long, but it's and then plus there's a lot of teams that when you do start playing, they're all at the same time, so they're getting access to fields. And what you also see happening a lot right now, a lot of the practices are in a softball field.
Yep.
Well, softball, it'd be like football, it'd be like us. I mean, we needed the field to be 53 to 3rd yard wide. We needed 120 yards. Those things become big in practice in the game because spacing's so big of the game. So you start going in a softball diamond, it's taking something away from your preparation.
Correct. Well, thank you for stopping by and taking the time to chat today. I also want to express my gratitude for letting Jaron and I be part of the Marauder football program and the Marauder family so early on. I think the older and older I get, and obviously I'm only 30 now, so I got a long ways to go still, but there's just so many moments along the way from my own life experiences where I've just kind of not necessarily taken it for granted previously, but have grown more and more appreciative of the guys I got to be around. I know being in professional teaching, coaching, whatever it is, I've learned more and more that the people you surround yourself with make a huge difference, and not just for yourself, but just the environment you're in. But I know, like I said, the further and further I get into any profession and career I have, the happier I am that I was able to be around so many great guys. I know when I was in graduate school, I was in cultural diversity class, and I didn't realize how much diversity I was exposed to at such a young age, being around the guys from Houston, the guys from Vegas, and the guys from all over the country at football practice, because that was just normal to me. We're going to Mary football practice after school, and you get to hang out with all your big brothers. And I never realize how unique of an experience that was, and it's even cooler to see those guys now. And obviously, I'm growing up, and some of them look the same as they did 20 years ago, but thanks for all you've done for myself and my brother and my family, and I greatly appreciate all the childhood experiences I got to live, and now I get to give some of those to my little guy. So
well, that's awesome. Well, thank you. But a lot of it. So your dad and I played high school football together, so that we go way back. And then your mom really ran the football program. We were all the assistants, but she was awesome and she was a mainstay. And the one thing that I really appreciate just quickly is what was so impressive. The toughest time with kids out of areas like Easter and like Thanksgiving, and it was how your family brought them in those tough times, and that was enormous.
Yeah, I know. A couple of years ago, I was sitting at my parents' house. I was probably in high school, and we had all those kids over for whatever, Easter, Thanksgiving, whatever it was. And I looked at my mom and I said, "How many NCAA rules are we breaking right now?" She goes, "Just don't call the head office." I won't. I was just curious.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for stopping by.
Have a great summer.
You too.